Thank you, John. Good morning, everybody. Of course, the important speech today in Brussels is not this one. It is the one that Lord Hill will pronounce in the Econ Committee this afternoon. I, of course, invite you to follow his intervention on the web. So I'll try not to unveil too much of what he's going to say. At the same time, I will avoid saying things that he's not going to say, so it's not an easy exercise, but I will nevertheless try and give you an idea of the policy challenges that we see for the next Commission. And we mainly see at this juncture 5 key challenges. The first one is simply to finish our legislative business that we launched as a response to the crisis. We've done a lot. We've adopted a very significant number of major pieces of legislation, but we still have some unfinished legislative business. We have a number of important proposals pending. 8 proposals or so. Some of them are very important. Money market funds, for example, where we have to contain systemic risks. Structural reform of banks, we see that as very important as well to make sure that we put an end to the too big to fail problem in Europe. So we need, as soon as possible, if possible under the Italian presidency, if not early next year, we need to finish the legislative business where possible. So this concerns pending proposals, but it is likely that there will be at least one additional proposal next year, even though this still needs to be confirmed by the new Commissioner and the new Commission. But at technical level, we see as important that we issue a proposal on the recovery and resolution of CCPs. Work has been ongoing on that subject for quite a while now, both at international level and at European level. We have centralized massive risks within CCPs. This should make the financial system as a whole safer, but we have to make sure that we can address problems arising in CCPs. And for that, we think we need a robust recovery and resolution framework. So that's the first challenge. We have to complete our ongoing legislative business. Second challenge, and Mr. Ferber referred to that, implementation. Implementation of what has been agreed under the previous Parliament and the previous Commission. There are different components here. First component, monitoring the appropriate and consistent transposition of directives. We try and adopt regulations, directly applicable rules whenever possible, but in some cases we still have directives, so there will be an important role for the Commission to see to it that these directives are properly transposed. We take this job of monitoring implementation extremely seriously. So that's one component. A second component is, of course, getting through the system all the level 2 measures that are planned. We have counted slightly more than 400 empowerments that have been given to the Commission to adopt level 2 delegated or implementing acts. We're not going to adopt more than 400 regulations and directives because, of course, we are going to group these empowerments in a number of acts, but it remains that there will be a lot of acts to be adopted, and we have to make sure that we adopt these acts in a timely fashion. that the process is transparent so that all stakeholders can have a say in the process. We have to make sure that the level 1 text is perfectly respected. And also, from the standpoint of the Commission, it will be important whenever possible that in these level 2 acts we implement approaches that are genuinely European and that help making the single market function better. Last component of this second challenge on implementation, finalizing the setting up of banking union. We've come a long way already. The ECB will act as the direct supervisor of the biggest banks in the EU on the 4th of November, so that's well in train. But we still have quite some work to do in relation to the second pillar of banking union. Here the legislation has been adopted, but we have to set up the single resolution board, and we need a single resolution board up and running as soon as possible in 2015. So that is an important element of this implementation challenge, but we think that work is well underway in this respect too. A third challenge that I see is evaluation. We've completed a historical reform of the financial system in Europe, maybe of a magnitude that has no precedent. We need in the coming years to carry out an ex-post evaluation of the impact of the rules. We have to make sure that the rules achieve their intended objectives. We have to monitor unintended consequences. We have to also look at the consistency of the entire reform and the linkages between the different pieces of legislation. So I believe that there will be an important ex-post evaluation work to carry out. I think, to be honest, that in most instances it's too early to do it now because you need to give time to the rules to bed down and to have their impact. But if we are to do a serious analysis in, say, 2 or 3 years, I believe that we have to start doing that now, and we have in the Commission to establish a plan so that we can assess the impact of the financial reform in an effective manner. And of course, we should be ready as a result of that evaluation process to adjust some of our rules where needed. Maybe in some cases we've gone too far. Maybe in other cases we've left a number of loopholes. There may be cases also where there are inconsistencies between rules. So we need to be ready to make adjustments where necessary. Fourth challenge, of course, Capital Markets Union. We cannot hide that, given that it is stated very clearly in the mission letter that President-elect Juncker gave to Lord Hill. We've done a lot to stabilize the financial system over the last 5 years. We now have to make sure that the financial system really underpins growth in the EU and facilitates the flow of investments where they are needed. We know that in that context, banks will be increasingly constrained. We know that we rely too much on banks. 80% or so of the funding of the economy comes from the banks. That is not going to change dramatically, but there is a need to try and rebalance that to some extent, and we need to diversify the funding of our economy. If we don't manage to do that, there is the risk that we could be confronted with a serious funding gap. We don't see it for the moment too much, even though private investment has fallen sharply. But there's also a lack of demand. for investments and for loans. But if the economy would pick up in the coming years, we could there be confronted with a very serious funding gap, because banks, for various reasons, will not be able to make enough loans, and we may have capital markets and other sources of financing that are not sufficiently integrated and developed to face the challenge. So we definitely have to work on that. I think there is an agreement on the diagnosis, but we now have to do a very thorough work to understand what doesn't work in our capital markets and in non-bank-based financing in general. We have to really deepen our economic analysis, identify the main problems, bottlenecks, barriers, which result in distortions in the allocation of capital and in the fragmentation of our single market. And then we will need to adopt an action plan with, I hope, very concrete measures that will allow us in the next 5 years under the next Commission to really improve the funding landscape in the EU. That clearly is going to be a major priority for next year. So the establishment of a clear concept of what Capital Markets Union should be about, because Mr. Ferber was right, we still need to define exactly what our objectives should be, and then we'll need an action plan that responds to this concept, an action plan that should be both ambitious but also politically realistic. Fifth and last channel, leading us to the next session, if I may, international coordination. I think personally that this will become even more important than over the last few years. We have first at the bilateral level to deepen our cooperation with the United States. We have to make it much more effective than what it is now. A case in point is the area of cross-border derivatives, where even though we've been discussing with the CFTC for 2 or 3 years now, we still haven't agreed on a coherent implementation of the G20 requirements in the area of cross-border derivatives. So this is a priority for the coming weeks and months, but beyond that, we need to have a much more result-oriented and effective cooperation with the United States to make sure that EU rules and US rules are really interoperable, dovetail well, and allow for safe and efficient transatlantic markets. And of course, bilateral cooperation will be important too, with a number of other financial centers, Japan, China, Hong Kong, Singapore, Switzerland, and a few others. Second thing, at the international level, we will need to pursue cooperation at the multilateral level, in the G20, in the Financial Stability Board, in the Basel Committee, and in other international bodies. Here, two things are, in my view, particularly important. We have to use these international bodies to monitor the proper and coherent application of international principles and standards. We feel that the spotlight is too often driven to the EU and the US. That's good to some extent, but we should not lose sight of other important jurisdictions which have to do the job as well of repairing the financial system and making it more resilient. So the multilateral bodies can help us in this respect, one thing. And the second thing, going forward, I think there's a case for these international bodies to establish international principles and standards that are more precise, more granular. We've done that in the area of banking, for example. I think we need to do that in the area of insurance too. We need to do that also in the area of market infrastructures, for example. If we have standards that are sufficiently granular, we will go a long way towards avoiding loopholes in the system that we are establishing to protect financial stability, and will go a long way as well towards mitigating risks of regulatory arbitrage. So I see this as a last important challenge for the next few years. Thank you.